Hi there, welcome back to the YouTube channel. We're back again and we're still looking at some of the main set legends that I've taken and turned into commander decks. And today there's no real surprise here because you're all here for it. And today it is Jenova, Ancient Calamity, 2 black and green for a 1/5 legendary creature alien. I think it's the first creature that's ever been named alien that's made it onto MTGO. I think there might have been some of the commander decks that never quite made it here, but you know, it's still an alien. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Jenova's power on up to one other target creature. It becomes a mutant. And then whenever a mutant dies, you control dies during our turn, you draw cards equal to its power. Okay then. So basically it's a black-green +1/+1 counters matters commander. Well, that's how I've seen it anyway, so that's what today's deck's going to be. Here we go. Hope you enjoy it. No planeswalkers today, so straight into the creatures. Birds of Paradise, obviously for ramp, along with the Gold Vein Hydra, which is quite nice because if you manage to get at least +1/+1 counter on here when Jenova's in play, and assuming you've got Gold Vein Hydra at a reasonable level, as well as getting all the treasure tokens equal to its power, you also get to draw all those cards as well. So we can't really complain about the Gold Vein Hydra today. Paw Patch Recruit also comes in from Bloomborough. Had to remember what the set was called then. Whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell and ability an opponent controls, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control other than that creature. Okay, that's fine. We like that plan. That's good. More +1/+1 counters. Aberrant, part of the Gene Stealer cults in Warhammer 40k, but it comes from the 40k deck. Has Ravenous. When it enters, when it deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. And if you get the X up to 5 or more, you get to draw a card when it enters play. Biophagus also comes in from the same 40k deck from Commander Land. This one lets you spend mana, add mana of any colour. And if this mana is spent to cast a creature spell, it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Fine. Absolutely fine by me. Bristling Bill, obviously, for the landfall trigger and then the doubling. And then Drana, Liberator of Malakir. Yeah, I quite like this one. Flying First Strike. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. Yeah. So you do want to attack with Jenova occasionally, probably into someone who hasn't got any creatures in play. This will help pump up Jenova, who will then in turn pump up all your other creatures every other combat. So yeah, like that plan. Evolution Witness, we've got a few adapt creatures in here. This one's nice. Whenever you put a +1/+1 counter on it, you get to bring something back from your graveyard to your hand. And then Cami of the Whispered Hopes, a no-brainer when we're mucking around with +1/+1 counters to give us that extra one. And then you get to add X mana of any one colour where X is the Cami of Whispered Hopes power. So it helps you ramp again. Mossborn Hydra, another one that's a bit of a no-brainer nowadays from Foundation lands. A landfall gets you to double the number of +1/+1 counters on the Mossborn Hydra, which is really nice because it has trample. It becomes a bit of a threat. It does eat a removal spell, but at the end of the day, you might as well have that eat it rather than Jenova. Park Heights Maverick is also in as well. Has Dethrone, so that's nice. Whenever this creature attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It can't be blocked by creatures with power of 2 or less, so it gets through all the annoying tokens you may be coming up against. And then when it deals combat damage to a player or dies, the all dies trigger is important, you get to proliferate. Yeah, like this. Renegade Crassus, because of the evolve triggers, you might as well just evolve that as much as you can. And then Serpent Blade Assailant, we've got the backup creatures as well coming in for March of the Machines, if I remember correctly. This one's nice. 3 mana, gives something Death Touch for a turn, along with a and a +1/+1 counter if need be. A bit of a no-brainer. Travelling Chocobo should be any green deck going on now, just so you can play your lands off the top of your library. So it's here again today. And then Trommel Seymour's Butler. Yeah, this is another one of those cards you're probably going to see in a lot of decks going forward. Each other non-token creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, and then you can pay 1 and tap it and proliferate X times, where X is the number of non-token creatures you control that entered play this turn. Yeah, like that. Very nice. Thank you. Ursine Monstrosity comes in from the Duskborn Commander decks. Beginning combat, mill a card. and then choose an opponent at random. The monstrosity attacks that player and it gets indestructible and gets +1/+1 for each card type amongst cards in your graveyard. So, you know, creature, land, enchantment, instant, sorcery, you know the score. The Watchful Radstag comes in from Fallout. Again, an evolve trigger. Might as well have this evolving so you get extra copies of the Watchstag as things go along if it stays in play. And Khazar, Ruthless Stalker. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage for a player, +1/+1 counter. Doomskull Warrior's got the backup, and then we get to reveal cards of the lands when it deals combat damage. And then you put one in your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Forgotten Ancient just gets bigger every time someone casts a spell. Now, this works really well, Jenova, because in your upkeep, you move all the +1/+1 counters off Forgotten Ancient, put them on Jenova, and then you can put all the +1/+1 counters back on from when Jenova's trigger goes off in combat onto the Forgotten Ancient, and then attack and probably draw a whole load of cards, but bear that in mind. No Master Chef is in because I just like the Master Chef, to be perfectly honest, and we do like having non-token creatures enter, so we might get some foods. That's nice. Lily Bowen, the Raging Grandma, is a mutant at heart anyway, and it enters the battlefield with a couple of +1/+1 counters on it, and then at the beginning of upkeep we get to double it. Double the number of +1/+1 counters with a power of 16 or less. Otherwise, remove all but one +1/+1 counter from it. Then you gain 1 life for each +1/+1 counter removed in this way. I did a whole deck a while back on Lily Bowen, and it's quite good fun. So that's how you can go search that here on the YouTube channel. But yeah, Lily's in here for the sake of it today. Rampant Rejuvenator just comes in so we can go and find our basics. Renata, the Call to the Hunt, just gives an extra +1/+1 when creatures enter on them. Rev, the Tithe Extractor, just gives something Death Touch, which makes it a bit harder to block. Hopefully that means you get your combat damage through, get a treasure, exile the top card of someone's library, then cast it. Another one coming in from the main set of Final Fantasy is Saza Katsuri, purely because we can go and find a basic land, and then whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on that creature. Can turn something into a really big threat really quickly as long as Jenova's got some power boosting going on. Archpriest of Shadows just returns things with a backup, as we know. Defiler of Vigor, we cast green spells, or green permanent spells, I should say. We get to put +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, which is just lovely for us. Likewise, the Conclave Thief caption has the 3 separate instances of backup, so, you know, and then when it deals combat damage, that put that many +1/+1 counters on those creatures with a backup. From there, Vorinclex is changed. I set this up so I had the right thing on it. I did. I even went and set this all up. I followed the instructions I was given. There we go. Let's just set this up. Sorry if I'm annoying people, but I did do it ages ago. If you would put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many on it. And if an opponent would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, they put half that many permanents rounded down. So, you know, that's nice. Zontrapil makes an appearance as well, just to double up all the power and toughness each combat, and hopefully we can sacrifice a couple of things to keep it indestructible. And because I'm in black-green, and I do love this card from Tarku Dragonstorm Commander decks, Colossal Grave Reaver is in again. Yeah, mill 3 when it attacks and enters, and then whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put one of them onto the battlefield. Yeah, I can't fault this. Just love it. Still love it. It's going to type in a lot of green-black decks for mine going forward, just so we're clear. Sorceries are all ramp, will and control spells, so Fast Seek, Nature's Law, Rampant Growth, and 3 visits. And then Damnation gives a little bit of board control. No instants, just them as sorceries. And then the artifacts, well, you know, traditional Elixir of Immortality to shove everything back in when it goes pear-shaped. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. We've put the medallions in today, the Jet one and the Emerald one. Thought Vessel for some more, keeping our hand size up where it should be. Bone Sabers, because it's just stupid from 40k land. Attack with the equipped creature attacks, it gets 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Really nice if you can equip it to Jenova for the other turns. And Thunderous Velocipede. I don't think people pay enough attention to this card for me to drift. Just comes in for 3 mana as a 5/5 with a crew 3, which, yeah, okay, isn't great. It has trample, that's fine. But each other vehicle and creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if its mana value is 4 or less. Otherwise, it enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Yeah, fine by me. we're going to play, and I've also decided to go back to Final Fantasy for the couple of cards here for the crystals. So I quite like the Darkness Crystal, so we can exile creatures as they die and we gain some life. And then we get to basically nick a creature that's been exiled with the Darkness Crystal to the battlefield, tapped under our control with an additional +2/+1/+1 counters on it. 6 mana is expensive, 10 mana overall, very expensive, but you know, could be 9 mana overall. Bear that in mind, because obviously with Emerald Medallion, the Earth Crystal does the same thing. Well, no, it doesn't, but it does have a static ability. We'll put if one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, put twice that many on it instead, and then 6 mana again. We get to chuck around a couple of +1/+1 counters on 1 or 2 target creatures we not control. So you can either put 2 +1/+1 counters on 1 creature at some stage. Hello, Jenova. Or you can just go 1-on-1 and then double them. So yay, fine. Finally, because we like +1/+1 counters, the Great Henge is in just to give us that little bit of ramp and mana and life and all the rest of it. You know what it does. A few enchantments help us out, obviously, because we are in a +1/+1 deck. So Burgeoning for the extra land drops. Hardened Scales is a no-brainer, as you can imagine. Hollow Merc Siege is also coming in here. Now, depending where you are in the game, depends which one of these two abilities you choose. Now, I've played this deck a little bit, and I've had one game where I had the Sultai one, which worked nicely. I had one game where I had the Esben one, which also worked nicely, so it's your choice. I think the Sultai one is a little bit stronger due to the card draw, but if you need to make your creatures menace and give them a bit of persuade or evasion, the Asban one is completely fine as well. Innkeeper's Talent obviously had to be here. Sphere Grid also comes in from the commander sets from Final Fantasy. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then Unlockability. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have reach and trample. Yeah, can't fault that. Really like that idea. This enchantment is fantastic. If you can pick one up without having to buy the commander deck, do so quickly. It's great. Sylvan Anthem to pump up all our green creatures and then give us a little bit of scry fun. Branching Evolution doubles up on the +1/+1 counters as they get put on the creatures. From there, Gaia's Anthem just pumps all our creatures up anyway, which helps Jenova if we haven't got any +1/+1 counters on them. Sylvan Scavenging, +1/+1 counter on our end step, or if we've got a creature with power 4 or more, a 3/3 Raccoon. Tribute to the World Tree just helps no matter what you've got going on, but 3 green mana could be tricky, but we've got ways around it. And then Path of Discovery, because who doesn't do a little bit of exploration with an alien? Because aliens do explore. That's my justification for it. Please feel free to disagree in the comments, but that's my justification. From there, Doubling Season, because why wouldn't you? Glorious Sunrise is just another way of us giving our creatures +1/+1 and trample till the end of turn. Or, if we really need some mana, card draw, or some life, it's all there. I quite like doing the first one of this, though, it's just a sneaky way of ensuring we get the trample damage through for our creatures. And then finally, coming in from Dustmourn, the Funeral Room / Awakening Hall. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1, we gain 1. And then if we go for the Awakening Hall, 8 mana, just return all creature cards from our graveyard to the battlefield. Thank you very much. Do love this enchantment as well. Lands, well, it's going to be black and green all the way through. Nothing particularly fancy here. We have got 10 forests. We have played the town from Final Fantasy, Haunted Moor, Jungle Hollow. Necroblossom Snarl. I don't usually play the Snarls, but I figured in this deck it was fine. Overgrown Tomb, Reliquary Tower, Swamp. 6 swamps compared to 10 forests, and you can guess the reason for why. Tainted Wood, Temple of the False God, Twilight Mar, Underground Mortuary, Undergrowth Stadium, Urborg, Tomb of Yagamoth, hence why there's less swamps, and Verdant Catacombs with the Viridescent Blog this one's the Fallout version, so we can tap it and pay 1 and add a green and a black. Woodland Cemetery, Wastewood Verge from Aetherdrift, and Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, to make sure everything is either a swamp or a forest and a swamp, depending which way you do it. And that's it. That is my take on Jenova, the Ancient Calamity. Now, I'm sure there is some way of making this more fun, but I just like +1/+1 counter decks, so I went with that route on it. But if you've got any other different ideas, please let me know in the comments. I'm quite happy to upgrade my decks as I do the streaming, and this may be one that I look at upgrading sometime in the future. But for now, please hit the subscribe button if you can. There's 706 as I record this video today, so thank you to everyone who subscribed recently. And there's a link down below to Twitch if you want to see me play the decks I talk about on the YouTube channel. Please go and give me a follow on Twitch, and you can see me when I'm streaming. And yeah, hit all the things on Twitch, when I go live. But that's it for now. I'll be back tomorrow with the last deck of the week. So for now, have a good one. Take care. Bye.